those who do not know, that was the sound of the shofar. The shofar is an ancient instrument that was used by ancient Israelites to call attention to important events, to draw people's eyes and ears to a warning that there was impending danger, as well as to announce good news. For those of you who do not know, my name is Craig Winn. I have written 30 books, most of which are derived from my translation of the Dead Sea Scrolls. I am America's foremost scholar of the caustic nature of Islam. I have written Prophet of Doom, following my meeting with Al-Qaeda, to expose and condemn the terrorist nature of the Islamic religion. I did so by taking the two earliest chronological and historical presentations of Muhammad's life and the formation of Islam, Tabari's history of Islam's formation, and Ishaq's biography of the Messenger of Allah. And I used them to reorder the Quran into chronological order and set it into the context of Muhammad's life. The result, Prophet of Doom, Islam's terrorist dogma, and Muhammad's own words, is available free for you to read at prophetofdoom.net. I've also written a 4-volume series called Questioning Paul that proves conclusively that the author of 14 of the New Testament's letters was a complete fraud, a demon-possessed individual who was exceedingly anti-Semitic. And as part of that process, I've also proven that the Christian New Testament is a completely unreliable. And I have done using a technique heretofore untried, which is actually irrefutable. And that is, I have juxtaposed Paul's claims in his letters with what Yahowah, the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob, had to say. At the time that I composed those books, some 25 of the volumes that I have written since, called Yahweh, Yada means to know, Yahweh is God's one and only name, are sitting on the bookshelf at Yahowah.com, and I would encourage you to read them. And it is based upon having devoted 22 years of my life to exposing and condemning the religion of Islam, while at the same time working to awaken Israel, so that after nearly 3,000 years of estrangement from Yahweh, God's people might come to know the truth and return home. I'm going to share something that I wrote the morning of October 7th of this year. It is, like so many opportunities, 2 years, I was editing a volume of Yahowah from the Observation series. Happens to be the 5th volume. And I came to the passage I'm going to read next. It's from Zephaniah. And it speaks directly of Gaza. I was editing that the very morning that Islamic terrorists from Gaza crashed through the barrier fence and entered Israel to perpetrate such on God's people. This is what I was inspired to, and I wanted to share with your friends to listen, to gain from it, discussing with you today. Of all the people cluttering this planet, the vile souls masquerading as Philistines while terrorizing Jews are among my least favorites. The same is apparently true with Yahowah, who just happens to be God. He inspired his prophet, Zephaniah. Zephaniah means Yahweh's treasures are stored up for another time. How appropriate to write the following for us to read. Indeed, Gaza shall be abandoned and rejected, Azab, disassociated and deserted. And Ashkelon, pile of trash, beyond the word means, will approach uninhabitable wasteland, Shamama, an appalling ruin clothed in horror. Ashdod, which means those who deal treacherously and are violently destructive, cruelly assaulting, and devastating thieves, will be driven out and expelled, Garash, moved and banished. By midday, while Ekron, which means to be uprooted and plucked away, will be Akar, pulled up by the roots. Zephaniah, Yahweh's treasures are stored up for another. Zephaniah 2:4. The names of places are sufficient to explain what God thinks of the sorry souls occupying Gaza, fierce and forsaken, the damned and destitute, abandoned and rejected, the pile of trash behind the gate of dung, worthless garbage and repulsive excrement, those who deal treacherously and violently, who are destructive, whose assaults are cruel, and whose thievery is devastating, sadistically despoiling, while brutally ruinous. Yes, this could serve as the byline and the mission statement for does not belong to them, no matter how many suicide bombers blow themselves to smithereens, no matter what name they have selected to obfuscate their true nature. Yahweh is going to depopulate them, adorning them in the horror that they have inspired. They will be uprooted and tossed away. Mark your calendars, because this will occur 10 years from now, during Sukkah, in the 120th Yobel, the Shabbat of October 7th, 2033, as the sun sets one final time on the enemies of Yahweh, Yisrael, and Yahowdym. Yes, my friends, there will be a much brighter October 7th than you experienced this week. As I edited the words in the volume of observations as part of the Yahowah series of books this past Saturday morning, I grew more disgusted by the leadership of the world than ever before. Yesterday evening, as we considered Yahweh's intent regarding Sukkah on Yahowah Radio, celebrating the 8th day, program that received greater listenership in Israel than anything we had done previously. But at that same time, crazed militants from the Islamic terrorist organization Hamas in Gaza were scheming with the theocrats in Iran to tear down the wall that Israel had erected to keep them at bay. As the sun rose, bulldozers, which in saner hands are tasked with construction, were deployed by Muslims to destroy the high-tech fence protecting Jews from them. Teenage boys, along with some in their 20s, even 30s, armed with religious hatred and automatic weapons, dressed in black jeans, t-shirts, tennis shoes, and face masks, invaded the Promised Land. Most were on foot and guided, while others lined up to enter Israel on motorcycles and in pickup trucks. The scene, captured on celebratory selfies, was chaotic and uncoordinated. With no one there from the IDF to interrupt their party or impede their progress, this death cult of marauding militants flooded in unabated and proceeded to savagely murder what will soon climb to be over 1,000 Jews in cold blood, a quarter of whom were kids attending a music festival. They wounded 2,200 more, mostly in the streets and in their homes. The images were akin to the pogroms throughout Europe a century ago. Per capita, the carnage on this day was 4,000% worse for Israel's 7 million Jews than the surprise attacks on Pearl Harbor in 1941 or the suicide bombings in 2001 were for America. And yet, rather than garner the world's collective rage, a calls more than Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, or the PLO. China, Russia, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and the European Union, and soon thereafter even America, have or will call for an end of hostility and for the imposition of the two-state solution. Rewarding terrorism in this way would be akin to giving the Japanese Imperial Navy Hawaii as a reward for the attack, and then to appease New York. It's aggression, Czechoslovakia, because at least Neville Chamberlain, so before the invasion of Poland, not after it. The fake Athenians captured 125 Jews, mostly women and children, and they beat them while hauling them back to their sewer of religious rage. They would hold them as hostages, initially as human shields, which is standard operating procedure for these cowards who are famous for using their own women and children in this manner. But the premeditated intent of their human trafficking would be to trade the lives of innocent people for those of convicted terrorists. Should you be moral and rational, the events of this day served as proof that the creation of a Palestinian state would be suicidal, akin to reopening Auschwitz. The Muslims called their terrorist assaults on God's people flood of Al-Aqsa, unaware that Yahweh used flood to predict the caustic influence of their invasion 2,700 years ago in Yasha'yah, Isaiah 17 and 18. In fact, it was after presenting these prophecies last year at this time that I predicted the events of this day, specifically explaining how there would be too many rockets for the Iron Dome to intercept and too many jihadists crossing the border to contain. I even predicted that they would infiltrate smaller border communities where they would wreak havoc unopposed, with the IDF arriving with too little, too late to protect Israelis. Like almost everything that comes out of the mouths of Muslims and the progressives who coddled them, the truth was the opposite of their claims. But that did not stop the news media from parroting the lies of apartheid, occupation, and oppression as justification. It was hard to watch and listen as anti-Semites the world over applauded and Muslims celebrated, all duped by the myths they have promoted. And yet, in reality, there is no such thing as a Palestinian, and there hasn't been one for well over 2,000 years. Worse for the myth, even before the Philistines were exterminated by the Egyptians, Assyrians, and the Greeks, they were known to be savage foreigners. They were invaders from Crete. There is no occupation, at least not by Jews. To their detriment, and at the insistence of the Clinton administration, Israel surrendered much of Judea and Samaria to the PLO, known as the PA today. Ignorant of that disaster and how it had created a breeding ground for terrorists, at President George Bush's urging, Gaza was surrendered, literally abandoned to be occupied by Israel's enemies. Those mistakes, along with the anticipation that the world would seek to destroy Israel's viability by continuing to encourage Islamic terrorists through the promotion of their two-state solution, led to this day. Believing the regions they were occupying, and which were devoid of Jews, needed to be liberated to create a state named after an extant group of barbarian invaders to whom none of them were related. Fundamentalist Muslims terrorized the indigenous people of the land. Even worse, they were led to believe that Al-Aqsa Mosque is an Islamic holy site rather than an assault on their intelligence and the credibility of their religion. In reality, the mosque and dome are trophies to religious rage, to barbarian invasions, and to political ignorance. Islamic claims on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem are born out of the most insane and immoral moments in Muhammad's putrid life. For that story, read Prophet of Doom, Islam's terrorist manifesto, in Muhammad's own words. After all, the allure of his wild ass lives on and was manifest in the religious malfeasance of this day. As the foremost expert on Islam's corrupting influence, I watched in horror as Muslim boys ran through the toppled fence into Israel with the intent of capturing and killing Jews. The pictures these savages shot on their cell phones showed that they were indoctrinated beyond hope. Worse than Nazis, with no respect for life, indiscriminately victimizing women and children, even ransacking and robbing their dead bodies. It was a replay of what Muhammad and the had done 1,400 years ago in Yathrib and in Kabar. Nothing had changed, except some were on motor scooters rather than camels, and they wielded AK-47s and RPGs instead of swords. The best and the worst of what I witnessed this morning, October 7th, 2023, was the failure of the vaulted IDF to stem the flood of jihadists. 16 hours after the breach, there was no one there to deflect the tide of terror. No one even to thwart the passage of captured Jews into Gaza. As a result, Muslims massacred civilians in 22 communities and brutalized innocent Jews from 14 miles into the narrow country. During their prolonged slaughter, the drama seemed to play out in slow motion without a coordinated national response. And so you may ask, what could possibly be seen as good coming out of any of this? The answer is, first time, the most revered institution in Israel, the IDF, failed to protect Jews. There will be a resulting severe degradation in confidence in a nation already torn apart between the secular and religious, the far left and the far right, and by judicial reform in a country so at odds with itself, it can't form a constitution. With this being Israel's new norm, horrible prophets, there is the hope, finally, God's people, Yahowdym, the beloved of Yah, will stop relying upon their military, their politicians, and their religion. Perhaps now, a remnant, after what has been a very turbulent 4,000-year estrangement. The religion that Jewish rabbis in Yathrib helped to create by reciting Talmud stories to illiterate Muhammad for profit were bastardized by Allah's messenger, this mass murdering terrorist, rapist, and pedophile. Without those Talmud recitals, 80% of the Quran vanishes, along with the religion's credibility. Nicely played, rabbis. Israel, you were at war with yourselves and with your God. This is largely because the religions of your ancestors, the ones that they created, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, it is also because you're unwilling to tell the truth about your enemy. But more on that in a moment. When I began serving Yahowah and His people by exposing and condemning their religious foes some 22 years ago, there wasn't a single Jew who celebrated Yahweh's name or who had accepted the 5 conditions of the covenant. Little by little, that has changed, with 0 becoming 100 and 100 becoming 1,000, as we grow until a remnant of God's people witness Yahweh's return with Dod, the Messiah and Savior, on Yom Kippurim, the Day of Reconciliations, in year 6000 Yah, 6:22 p.m., as the sun sets in Jerusalem, October 2nd, 2033, just 10 years from now. So I ask God's people, will you be there on that day, celebrating life with Yahweh and your King, Dod? Will you be among those appeasing Islam, tolerating Judaism, and relying on Israeli intelligence and the IDF to save you from yourselves and from those who hate you? Or alternatively, Jews can continue to rely on the Mossad, the Shin Bet, and the IDF intelligence services. But to do so, you may want to ask yourself how it was possible for journalists at the Wall Street Journal to detail the elaborate planning between Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas in the weeks preceding the attack, when Israeli intelligence missed it all. How is it that Israelis managed to ignore the IRG and Hamas social media posts on Friday afternoon, justifying the impending assault? And then ask yourselves why it took half a day for the government of Israel and the IDF to respond, considering that Muslims breached the most high-tech impediment ever devised at sunrise, and then lingered to take selfies. It was all reminiscent of ElYah, sarcastically excusing the constipated response of Baal, the Lord, suggesting that his inactivity was the result of him being indisposed. So, as was the case with the prophets of Baal and Asherah, inquire, what is such that the most intellectually gifted people on earth could be so easily deceived? You were played for a fool by fools. Israel is now playing a lose-lose game, one without any chance of success. There are only bad options and ill-equipped leaders. This is a combination of 2 factors. First, Israelis are unwilling to explain or accept the truth about the myth of the Palestinians, or why Muslims are committed to eradicating them. As such, they are flailing unsuccessfully at symptoms rather than the cause. Symptoms and the disease remains, and this is lethal. And second, the world is galvanized against Israel, mislabeling their every move, while upholding the lies promoted by their enemies, even rewarding behavior. There is no longer a viable option regarding Gaza. Hamas is a symptom of a much more ingrained and pervasive problem, Islam. Should you be ignorant of this reality, then read Prophet of Yah. My case against Islam is irrefutable, because every page held Scripture. I used Shophar historical portrait of Islam's formation and Ishaq's biography was the earliest and most chronologically and set it into the context of Muhammad's despicable life. Know your enemy. Come to understand what happened today occurred 1,400 years ago in Yathrib and in Kabar. The terrorists of October 7th, 2023 were no different than Muhammad's gaggle of goons plundering the Jews of Arabia. According to the Quran, all good Muslims are terrorists. The proof, then and now, ubiquitous and irrefutable. Denying this reality will lead to more days worse than today, and it will cloud the nation's judgment such that its resources are squandered, making a bad situation worse. Therefore, if the IDF could kill every Hamas leader and 90% of its militants, there would be 10 more created for every martyr. It is impossible to prevail against a religious ideology with bullets or bombs, unless that bomb is nuclear and kills them all. But that's untenable. Not only would the radioactive fallout poison Israel, the world's response to the deaths of 2 million people would be the obliteration of Israel. Frankly, Hamas would rather rape, torture, and kill the captives than hand them over to Israel, making a rescue mission more costly than today's response to the invasion. It's already happening. Women are being paraded naked and bleeding in the streets, and soldiers are being beheaded after enduring the humiliation of being caged like animals. The population, armed to the teeth and hoping to die for the glory of the faith, cannot be occupied at an acceptable or sustainable price. And after trading them for convicted and imprisoned terrorists, well, that will have the same result as what Biden wrought on Israel a month ago when he exchanged Iranian terrorists and some $6 billion for a handful of American tourists. And if Israel invades, it will trigger the second phase of the Iranian Hezbollah, Hamas, and Islamic Jihad plan, which is a far more massive aerial assault followed by one with 100 times more militants, all better armed, flooding in from the north, the east, the south, and the west. But if Israel doesn't invade Gaza, Israelis will cower in fear, knowing that this was the first of many such attacks and that their days are numbered. Their lives are at risk. It's lose-lose. Sadly, there isn't the leadership in Israel to do what must be done to survive. But I'll tell you the truth. First, the lie of the concept of a place called Palestine and people called Palestinians must be told, and it must become illegal for anyone in Israel to use their title. It is the plague of Hadrian revisited. Second, regarding his wild ass flight to the non-existent temple to meet with long-deceased Jews en route to the Islamic heaven by way of its hell, must be told and repudiated. Since it was Muhammad's response to his satanic verses, the truth is so devastating to the Quran's credibility that it becomes fatal for Muslims to persist in their claims. Both buildings were initially constructed as trophies, validating Allahu Akbar, that Allah was greater than Yahowah. They emerged as the world was ravaged by the first Muslims, as they killed a third of the world's population from India to Africa. Both blights on the Temple Mount must be raised, with no trace of them left to inspire greater jihad. It should have been done in 1967. Learn and live. Third, Prophet of Doom must become required reading for every Israeli. Consider it my gift to God's people. Know the truth, tell the truth, and start responding rationally to the threat of the most lethal and anti-Semitic plague ever conceived. Fourth, to survive, the enemy within must be exposed and constrained, and that enemy is Judaism. Yahweh hates it more than Islam, more even than the caustic myths of Christianity. Judaism has done more to impoverish Jews and separate them from their God than all other foes combined. Judaism is not just a parasite. It's on the cusp of killing the nation from within. Fifth, while people ought to be free to be stupid and believe the abominable myths of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, they are not free to act upon them to the detriment of Israel and Jews. The same is true with the absurdity of conspiracy theories and progressive politics. Israel needs a constitution where there is a separation between religion and politics and no financial support for either Islam or Judaism. It is only when an enlightened and receptive, anti-religious remnant of Yisrael returns to Yahweh and accepts the conditions of the covenant that there will be peace in the land. On this we have Yahweh's promise, and he has never been wrong nor failed to do as he has vowed. Should you be among those interested in living forever in God's company? Should you want to know him as he is and not as the religious have slandered him? Should you want to become part of his family and inherit the universe? Should you want to be emancipated and enlightened, enriched and empowered? I invite you to read Yahowah. Consider it my gift of life and of love and of knowledge to Yahhuwdym. All 30 volumes are free at Yahowah.com. Your other option, of course, is to reject this advice and continue as you have in the past. And they are not. Speak truthfully about the myths of Palestine or give them a state from which to terrorize you. Address the root cause of Islamic terrorism or remain in denial as they slit your throats. Believe the rabbis? Well, then at least you'll be dressed for your own funeral. For those who might rebuff my warning with an ad hominem assault, demeaning me by suggesting that it isn't realistic to declare war on a religion of 2 billion people, I would remind you that they declared war on you 1,400 years ago. There have been countless days like today, and there will be more to come if you don't face reality. For those who would seek to appease Muslims with control over your Temple Mount, with these appalling trophies scarring the Jerusalem skyline, and then giving them territories that are carved out of Israel, I would ask you to consider how well that approach has worked in the past. Oslo comes to mind, as does the surrender of Gaza. Who wants to be the next and last Neville Chamberlain? Should you choose to reject my olive branch from God because I have dared criticize the cult of Judaism, ask yourselves, why condemning the Jewish propensity to be religious is the dominant themes of the prophets. There is no topic throughout the Torah and the prophets which follow that God spends more time focused upon than condemning his people's propensity to be religious. He says that is what has separated him from you. It is what's caused all of the heartache these many years. Why has life been so degrading and dehumanizing for Jews? If Judaism is a benefit, why are the most religious in Israel also the least intelligent, the least productive, and the least willing to fight for Israel's survival? Why are they parasites? Was Israel comatose on this day because the rabbis added their own embellishment to the mikra of Sukkah with a 9th day of dressing the Quran up like it was a whore and kissing it? Is it what they have done to the Shabbat, making it the least productive time of the week, made it so vulnerable? Now, this is what Yahweh had his prophet write about the enemy who lives in your midst, the Philistinians. Woe to those who inhabit these places, those who are wickedly offensive, engaging in boisterous religious parades in the region along the sea, your nation of Cretians and Philistines. The word of Yahweh is against you, Canaan. You in the land of the Philistines, I will destroy you, such that there will be no inhabitants remaining. Zephaniah, Yahweh's treasures are stored up for time. Zephaniah 2:5. It is such an odd thing. These worthless Islamic terrorists have fraudulently bequeathed upon themselves a name which is only known through Yahweh's Torah, Nabi, wa Mizmor. If God's testimony is reliable, then they are foreign invaders who have no claim to the land. If Yahweh's testimony is unreliable, then there's no such thing as a Palestinian or Palestine, no matter how many morons they convince or how loudly they scream. The realization that this deception and delusional myth has been popularized to the point that it has become universally accepted demonstrates just far mankind has fallen. Be absolutely clear on this one point. God has not been deceived. He sees the so-called Palestinians for what they are, unproductive and belligerent, Satan-worshipping and anti-Semitic, foreign invaders and terrorists. Well, I want to thank you for listening. I want to encourage those of you who have heard this message to share it with your fellow Yahowdym. Share it even with the Goyim. Let the world know the truth. There is hope. There is a reason to live, a way to survive this onslaught. But it will take a very intelligent and thoughtful approach to not only what God has to say, but to the reality that surrounds us. It would be hard to find a Goy more committed to God's people than I have been these past 22 years. I've dedicated my life 7 days a week, 14 hours a day, to translating Yahweh's testimony, His Torah, Nabi wa Mizmor, on behalf of God's people. My mission is to awaken Israel and to invite God's people home, because God is giving you one last chance. The day of reconciliations, Yom Kippurim, its fulfillment will be with Dod's return to anoint the mercy seat, the Kipporeth of the Ark of the Covenant on this day. In year 6000 Yah, that is October 2nd, at the sun sets in Jerusalem, 2033, 10 years from now. There'll be no additional chances beyond this date. And there's nothing to lose between now and then, except your life, should you not avail yourselves of the covenant, the Mikre, and of your Savior, who fulfilled them on your behalf. Yes, let me share that with you. It was Dod, the Messiah and Son of God, David, your King, who is not only returning, but who fulfilled Pesach, and Matzah, and Bakurim, Shabua, Teruah, and will fulfill Kippurim and Sukkah. Each of them take us from the world we are in, poisoned by the guilt of religion and politics. Cleanse us of these things. Cause us to become immortal. Adopt us into God's covenant family. Enrich and empower us, enlighten and emancipate us, so that we can all do what I am doing at this moment, which is to share Yahweh's testimony with you and call you home for the ultimate family reunion between Yahweh and Yisrael, Yom Kippurim, in year 6000 Yah. There are 5 coordinating conditions of the covenant that you should also be aware of. They are all to your advantage. They are all described within the Torah. The first is to walk away from Babel, from the intermixing of religion and politics that I have besmirched in this presentation to you. God wants you to walk away from political and religious alliances and from the family of man and from societal influences. It is the only precondition to spending eternity with God. The second condition is to walk to Yahweh and be perfected. This occurs through the observation and attendance at the Moed Mikre, Pesach, Matzah, Bakurim, and Shabu in particular. And coming to understand what they actually represent, who fulfilled them, why he did so, and how they benefit you in particular, deliver the 5 benefits of the covenant. God then wants you to trust and rely upon him. And this is in contradiction to trusting and relying on the IDF, Israeli politicians, or the religious. God says, observe, closely examine, carefully consider the conditions of this covenant relationship if you wish to receive the benefits of it. That is the 4th condition. And the 5th, if you are a man, you must be circumcised. It is the sign of the covenant. And we as parents are to circumcise our sons on the 8th day. These are the 5 conditions of the covenant. They are all to our advantage. You lose nothing and gain everything as a result. The benefits of that very covenant that was offered to Abraham, Yitzhak, and Jacob, to all of Yisrael, and to all the world through them, is to live forever. To be perfected by God, because Dod's soul carried your guilt into Sheol, where he deposited it, never to be seen again, making you appear perfect in God's eyes. This leads to the firstborn of Yahweh being adopted into God's eternal covenant family, showing us the way to follow him home on Bakurim. This is followed 7 sevens later by Shabuah, where we are enriched and empowered, enlightened and emancipated by the set-apart spirit of Yahweh. Those of us who care about Yisrael, who care about Yahhuwdym, who love Yahweh, who cherish our relationship even with Dod, the Messiah and King, the opportunity to herald his story. Please do so before this next celebration of Kippurim, so that there will be a much more wonderful celebration of Sukkah, camping out with God. I'll leave you with one last thought. Please, if you're listening to this, go to yahowah.com. There's an entire bookshelf there. Begin with an introduction to God. Read it. It's all free. Even if you want the paperback or the hardback books, they're offered royalty-free through Amazon printing. The electronic books are pennies. And your soul is the gift as a result of coming to know Yahweh and accepting what he is offering, understanding what he is asking in return. Please, It's Yahowah.com. And if you want a transcript of what you have just read, you can go to Yahowah.com and to the resources page, and it is written for you right there. At War with Religion. Share it. I only have 3 caveats as it relates to that which I have written, my translations, transliterations, and insights, hundreds of thousands of which are presented in the volumes of Yahowah, hundreds of them, maybe thousands of them for the first time in 2,000 or 3,000 years, is that you never mix what I'm sharing, what God shared, His testimony, to promote any religious, political, or conspiratorial idea. Second, when you're confronted by threats like Islam, the Philistines, Hamas, Hezbollah, and the like, confront them with words wisely wielded. There are very few things that violence makes better, and never commit an act of violence based upon what you have learned from Yahowah or from myself. And third, if you're going to share what I have offered you, and I have given it to you freely, credit to where credit is due. I say this because far too many people have claimed my transliterations, my insights, and my translations for themselves and have started a mini cult as a result of it, where if you knew my situation, you would know I live on an island in the middle of the sea. I seek no followers. I seek no donations. I seek only to come to know, understand, and share the truth. And that truth can set you free. Thank you very much for listening. Good day.